caramel covered pretzel rods. These are candy covered pretzels that are really a favorite for our neighborhood. We had a neighborhood party a couple of weeks ago. I brought these and everybody loved them. So I'd like to show you how to make the caramel. It's very easy. It's just a little bit time consuming. You have to stir it all the time. So you take a cup of butter and a pound of brown sugar. Has to come conveniently pre-measured. Of course, that's 2 cups of brown sugar if you don't have a pound bag. 1 14.5-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk. And a cup of corn syrup. Now, the corn syrup helps the caramel from not crystallizing at the end. Since I'm a scientist, I tend to throw in a little bit of the science stuff. And then the process is just to cook that to 235 degrees, and you have to use a candy thermometer in order to make sure you have that temperature. It's very important. It'll take probably 20 minutes to cook this up to the 235 to 240 degrees. If it's cooked to too high a temperature, it gets real hard and can get hard enough that it'll pull fillings out of your teeth. So don't overcook it. If it's not cooked high enough, then it tends to be too runny and runs off the pretzels and is real sticky and gooey. So temperature control is pretty important, but you have a range from 235 to 240, and that'll be fine. Once everything is getting close to the right temperature, I like to take a pastry brush and a little bit of water and wipe down the sides of the pan so that all the sugar crystals are dissolved, and that way the caramel won't get grainy as it sits for a little while. The sugars can't crystallize because of the corn syrup. Okay, now that the caramel has started to cook, it's boiling, all the sugars have dissolved. What you want to do is take a pastry brush and a little bit of water and just brush down the sides of the pan so that any crystals that were up at on the surface of the pan are washed down into the caramel, and then they will dissolve completely. And so this will prevent caramel from getting crystallized after you've made your candy covered pretzels. So as I said, you want to take a candy thermometer and carefully measure the temperature, because you must not overcook the caramel, and you can't undercook it. So you have to get it to that 235 to 240 degrees. Stirring constantly is very important, and then turning your heat down a little bit as you get the product cooking and boiling and getting closer to that proper temperature. So it takes, as I said, 15 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes to cook this down to 235 to 240 degrees. Okay, now that our caramel is cooked to 235, I've transferred it into a little bowl so that I can dip the pretzel rods into the caramel. Try to get them about 3/4 covered with caramel, and then shake them to get the excess off. And then roll them in some pecans. And place them on a piece of wax paper on a baking sheet. We put those into a refrigerator for about 15 minutes, let them harden up, and then we have our pecan-covered caramel covered pretzels. And the final step is to melt some chocolate chips very carefully so that you don't get the chocolate out of temper. So if you can melt your chocolate chips over a double boiler, and when you see it about 3/4 of the chips are melted, take it off of the heat and continue stirring. The rest of the chocolate will melt, and you can then put it in a pastry bag and pipe it. So let's do that real quickly. So we just put a little bit of water in the bottom of a double boiler. You don't want the water to touch the pan that you're using. And let me grab some chocolate chips here. I used to work for Hershey, so I always use Hershey's chocolate chips. And as I said, they're tempered when they come from the manufacturer, so all you need to do is gently melt them. And again, this is needs to be a patient process, so you don't want to try to melt them too quickly and pull them off the heat before they've all melted, and let the last few melt without any additional heat. Okay, we're at a point where most of the chocolate is melted. There's still a few chips left. And what you want to do is take the pan off of the heat. Make sure you don't get any moisture in the chocolate because it'll make it seize up. And let those last few chocolate chips melt without any extra heat. And that will ensure that your chocolate is still in temper, and then when it's solid, it'll be nice and crisp and shiny, which is exactly what you want. So that looks perfect. We're going to make sure that we dry the bottom of the pan so we don't get any moisture in our chocolate. Okay, we have a little paper pastry bag, or you can use a plastic pastry bag or a cloth one. But we just want to put some of the chocolate into the bag. Important not to overfill your pastry bag, because what you want to do is roll it down and then cut off just the tip, so you get a nice fine stream. We squirt a little into the pan, and then just stripe your product. Dark chocolate. Sometimes I use a little white chocolate and dark chocolate. So you can mix it up, mix and match, whatever you like. Okay. These would then go into the cooler for another 10 minutes or so, just to make the chocolate nice and solid, and then you can enjoy them. But they're a delicious treat. Kids and adults, everyone loves them. They're pretzels, caramel, pecans, and chocolate. I recently acquired a cocoa plant, which is the tree that grows cocoa beans. This one's only about 4 months old, so it's really tiny. It'll take about 5 years for this tree to mature and then grow cocoa pods. And this is a ceramic cocoa pod, but it's very realistic looking. It's exactly what a cocoa pod looks like. And cocoa trees are unusual in that the cocoa pods grow directly on the trunk of the tree, not like an apple that grows way out on the small branches. Cocoa pods grow directly on the trunk of the tree. And cocoa comes from the seeds inside this pod. So most people don't think of chocolate as a fruit, but it is. It's a fruit. The fruit has about 40 seeds in it. You crack the pod open, scoop the seeds out, and then there's a process that's done on the farm. It's called fermentation. It's a natural process that causes heat to build up. It reduces the pulp, this is sticky white pulp on the outside of the cocoa beans, so that process makes the pulp go away. And it also creates the flavor precursors that when you roast cocoa, you get that great chocolate flavor. If you don't ferment the cocoa, it doesn't develop the proper chocolate flavor. So there's these on-farm processes of fermentation and then drying of the beans, because they contain about 30 or 40% moisture, and that has to be removed by sun drying usually, or there are mechanical dryers available. So you remove the moisture down to about 8% moisture, and then those cocoa beans are ready for shipment.